right, we're on the podcast now with Amber Velasquez from MetPro. She's in Florida, currently preparing for a hurricane, batten down the hatches, right?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you guys for having me.
You're probably used to dodging hurricanes if you've lived in Florida any good length of time.
I've been here about 5 years, and somehow we've always managed to stay away from the hurricanes, but I don't think there's any staying away from this one.
Oh man. Yeah, I have a friend in Jacksonville who is kind of, not sure exactly what she's going to get. Hopefully everyone's power stays on and, no major power lines go down or trees or branches or all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whew.
Yep, that's all I can hope for as well. We do have a generator, so we should be fine on power, but all the other things I hope go well also.
Yes.
What part of Florida are you in?
I'm just south of Tampa.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Well, we always enjoy having a nutritionist on the podcast, and whenever we send out an email to get questions, there's always lots of great questions that come in. Nutrition is a popular topic when it comes to marathon training, and it's a tricky one to get figured out. So we're going to jump into all kinds of great questions here. So this first one comes from Roger from Japan. He says, with so many diets being marketed, choices can be confusing. So if you had to boil down runner's nutrition to 3 simple bullet points that people can remember and that are easy to act on, what would those bullet points be?
That's a lot of caveats there.
It sure is, but that's a really good question by Roger. There's so much information out there, so it can be very overwhelming and confusing. So if I had to narrow it down to 3 bullet points, I would say number 1 would be focus on your meal timing. So eat every 2 to 3 hours. This helps regulate your blood sugar, plays an important role in your overall energy, your performance, and your metabolism. Number 2 would be to eat all the macros. So eat carbs, eat protein, eat fat. And then number 3, I would say if you're running, you want to make sure that you're having some intra-carb fueling. So anything greater than 60 minutes, you want to have some sort of intra-run fuel.
That's really good. Good
Yeah.
job, Amber. Boiled that down.
I tried to keep it sweet and simple.
That's right. I think that fits the bill.
What I should have asked you this first. What got you interested in becoming a nutritionist?
So back when I was in college, I was playing softball, and I actually got injured my into my freshman year, so I didn't even get to play further than that. I
Mm.
had a total shoulder reconstructive surgery done, and so that pretty much took me out. I had a good 12 months of recovery to look forward to. And in that time, I started really focusing on my health, getting stronger, rehabbing myself. I was doing physical therapy 5 days a week. And so that really got me interested in the fitness side of things. And then I was speaking with one of my trainers, and he started working with me on my nutrition as well. And that just really kind of sparked things. I loved it at that point. And then I actually met my husband at the gym. He was really looking for some help. So I started, training him, working with his nutrition, and he saw really great results. And I'm like, man, this really just fuels my soul. Like, I just love it
Hmm.
with a passion. And so that's what got me started. And then here I am now. I've gotten to work with professional athletes, college athletes. I've even done some clinical work. And now I'm here at MetPro. And I just love being able to help people accomplish their goals and kind of light that fire for their nutrition and fitness too.
I love it.
Well, let's jump in the next question. This one comes from Nikki. She says, hi, thanks for the opportunity to send in the question. I'm training for my second marathon after having my son, who is now 4. I've been trying to lose a little weight in the process. Instead of losing the last 5 to 10 pounds, I feel like I've added that weight. I feel bloated after long runs. Why is that? Is it water retention? I want to feel strong without gut issues on race day, but I'm also feeling a little discouraged. Maybe I'm not fueling right in between runs. Any advice would be greatly appreciated.
And that comes from
Yeah.
Nikki.
Yeah. And this is a couple questions here, but it's all really good because I see a lot of people that suffer from these same issues. And there could be a lot of different factors going on here. So the bloating could be from a food trigger, it could be water retention, it could be hormonal changes, especially, you've had children. So women in that stage of life also have a lot of hormonal changes that happen. And then you could even have some gut issues going on there. So I like to dive into digestive issues anytime I have a client experiencing a lot of bloating. It's important to really dive in and get to the root cause rather than just trying to put a band aid on it. It's important to fuel well before, during, and after runs. Um, so I stress this to everyone basically. So if you're eating the wrong things during the times of training or even outside of your training periods, that could be causing your upset GI system. And sometimes it could be as simple as limiting certain veggies. So things like broccoli and Brussels sprouts, that can cause bloating and gas. So I would really dive in and see what you're currently consuming and see if you can narrow down certain foods. So I would always start with a food log or a food diary to really track those symptoms and see if it's happening at a certain time of day with certain meals, certain food items, or if it's, a, an exercise response as well. So just digging deeper into those nutrition habits. Sometimes it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what it could be. Everyone is so different in how their body handles things. So it would be an individual approach to really figure out what's going on there.
No, I like the idea of the food log and trying to pinpoint, what when the symptoms occur and like kind of backtrack and see maybe what was consumed, drink wise, food wise in the hours preceding that. She mentioned feeling bloated after long runs. It could be as simple as using a fueling product that has maybe a sugar or some kind of additive that is, causing issues. So I think that's excellent advice for anyone who's dealing with gut issues is trying to peel back the layers, and figure out maybe what is the cause.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's not as easy as it sounds, but the more you write it down and really start tracking those symptoms, then you can really start to narrow it down. And of course, you can always work with a dietitian that specializes in something like this, but writing it down is a great place to start if you're just completely lost on what could be causing it.
All right, let's talk about perimenopause and menopause. We got some questions in about that. So, Angie, let's do this one from Anne.
Okay. She says, I'm a 43-year-old female, premenopausal as far as I can tell. I'm definitely not genetically predisposed to be a slender person, but by trying to keep some healthier eating practices and with my love of fitness and working out, I stay in semi decent shape. I'm curious if there is a way to make sure that my metabolism is working at a peak level without tracking everything I eat. I've done the food tracking thing in the past and I end up putting way too much emphasis on food that way. I get obsessed with the numbers and tracking, and it just doesn't seem like a healthy, sustainable practice for me. So, I guess my question is without tracking everything I eat, are there some steadfast rules that will help someone like me keep their metabolism working efficiently? And that comes from Anne.
Yes, and I love this because I often see perimenopausal or even menopausal women going through these same things, and it's really a tough stage of life to navigate. So I'm glad this was asked.
Mhm.
So what I see a lot of times in menopausal women is just not eating enough food for their body, and it's so hard because their weight starts going up, so they start restricting calories, and in the long run, that just deteriorates their metabolism even further. So I always say it's important to not be restrictive and you shouldn't feel hungry all the time. So if you're constantly hungry, then you really need to dive in and look at what you're consuming, how often you're eating. So there are a couple of things that I would suggest for you, Anne. And one of those would be to look at your meal timing. So try and eat every 2 to 3 hours and not go more than 4 hours between meals. And this really helps regulate your blood sugar, which can help with your energy and your metabolism overall because blood sugar plays a big role in your thyroid function and that ultimately controls your energy and metabolism. Um, Going too long between meals, when that negatively impacts your blood sugar, you'll notice things like your metabolism slowing down, and that's what we don't want. Two, I would say to eat enough protein throughout the day. So, along with the meal timing, aim for 20 to 30 grams of good quality protein every 2 to 3 hours as well. This will help keep you full. It'll help you maintain and preserve that muscle mass that you have. And if you're doing strength training, that will help you build some new muscle as well. And then for number three, I would keep your meals well balanced. Focus on having carbs, lean protein, healthy fats, and fiber, which is a big one because a lot of people are under consuming fiber, and that helps balance your blood sugar. And this will keep you full throughout the day. All of those macros is what helps you build and preserve lean muscle mass and supports all the hormonal functions that are happening in your body at this stage of life.
So you find people are under consuming fiber these days?
All the time. So a lot of times when I have women, they're like, oh, I'm getting plenty of fiber. But when I actually have them write it down and we do a little food log, they're probably under consuming by about 15 to 20 grams of fiber per day.
Mm.
And so they are usually the ones that have the gut issues with the bloating, the gas, the infrequency. And so once they start consuming more fiber, some of those start to resolve.
Infrequency of what? No, I'm just kidding.
Do you
Let's
really
not
want to
be
go
delicate
into detail?
here.
I talk about it all the time with clients.
Well, I mean, it's a huge part of our nutrition, and our elimination is, what comes in has to go out, and hopefully, you're eating enough fiber that, yeah, everyone should be having a bowel movement every day.
Exactly.
Let's just
At
say
least
that.
one.
At least
Yes.
one.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We tell our kids that, don't we, Angie?
I know. I'm like, have you had a bowel movement? When was the last time you did?
Angie's a nurse and used to work at a
Oh,
nursing home. So she asked a lot of people that question.
Yes.
yep. I did too. So I used to work in a nursing home for a little while as well as the dietitian there. And
Mhm.
I would often be talking with the patients about their bowel movements. I even do it
Yes.
with my MetPro clients. I'm like, how's your digestion? And they're like, well, why does that matter? That matters a lot because if you're
Yes.
not going, that means your weight will likely fluctuate on the scale a lot more. You're going to feel heavy, you're going to feel sluggish. Your exercise won't be as great because you're having all those other symptoms. So I always like to
Mhm.
dive in on that.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
think that's
it's not a
great.
comfortable topic to talk about,
Well,
but
runners talk about poop all the time. I mean, it's like it's a thing,
exactly. Yeah.
So what sources of fiber do you recommend people?
Yeah, so you can get fiber from food, and that's where I always like to start. And then if you really struggle there, you can look at fiber supplements. But things like your whole grains, your fruits and veggies have fiber. I also like to add things like flax seeds and chia seeds to my meals. That's an easy way to get in some extra fiber because you can basically add it to everything. I top
Sneak them in
my
there.
exactly my yogurt, my oatmeal, my smoothies. I'm throwing chia and flax pretty much everywhere. I even sneak it in my husband's food. That way he's getting his fiber in too.
Well, oatmeal is fibrous, right? Does that
It
count as a fiber?
it does count as a fiber. You're absolutely right. I always like to just add a little bit of extra because sometimes it's harder to get fiber in throughout the day, especially if you're traveling or on the road. So if you can load up earlier in the day and still try and hit that 25 to 35 grams, depending on if you're a male or female, that's just one way to jumpstart your day. That
Trevor,
fiber helps fuel your gut health. So
that's right. We've got a glass jar of a mix of flax and chia seeds in our cupboard. So start adding that to your oatmeal, Trevor, if you're
Yeah, I
oh, I
should.
more
love it.
fiber, because I do it all the time. I actually
Yep.
like to make up, like I call it like chia pudding, like
Oh, love
add,
that.
like make a little bit of almond milk and like a scoop, and then add it to my oatmeal in the morning. It's kind of already like pre hydrated by sitting overnight. My youngest son like eats them and calls them chia pudding, and he thinks it's amazing. Like it's
Yep, I love making chia pudding. It's great and it's good for your gut. Sometimes I'll even just take 1 or 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, mix it in some water, and let that soak for a little while. And then I drink that before breakfast. And that's just a
Mhm.
great way to get that digestive system pretty much like lubricated because
Yes.
it forms a gel consistency and just helps everything move a bit more freely.
Yeah, I like adding like a fresh squeezed lemon to it, and then just kind of, shaking it up, letting it sit, and boom,
Yep.
good cleansing way to start the day.
Exactly. People don't know what they're missing. When I tell them to do that, they're like, that's really going to work. I'm like, just try it for a few days. And sure enough, they're like, man, that worked wonders.
Yes, exactly.
So, Angie, you probably learned some of these tricks from being a MetPro client all these years.
I guess, I mean, I have learned a lot, but I mean, my digestion is something that I've kind of nerded out on my own. So like anytime they ask me about my digestion, I'm like, yep, we're good. We're
We're good
great.
there. That's always a good answer. I always
Yes.
love when a client's like, "Yep, my digestion's great." I'm like, "Perfect."
Exactly. Okay, this question comes from Jen. She says, as a 48-year-old female runner, I'm wondering how important it is to eat before a short run, 5 miles and under. I've noticed I'm not always hungry in the mornings and sometimes feel better running on an empty stomach. But is this sabotaging my training?
This is a really good question, and I get this all the time because a lot of people aren't used to eating breakfast or they prefer not to eat before they work out. But I would say, in my opinion and personal experience, to optimize your energy and performance, it's important to consume something before any type of workout, whether you're strength training, going for a run, doing a marathon, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be anything big or elaborate, but your body needs that fuel. And I stress this all the time. So back to the meal timing that I mentioned before, starting your day by eating that first meal within the first hour of waking up, that really helps get your metabolism going. That helps get your energy going because your blood sugar is regulated much sooner than if you fast, you work out, and then you eat something. Your blood sugar is already tanking by that point. So, excuse me, if you're not experiencing a lot of hunger in the morning after a full night of fasting, it might be a good idea to really dive into your metabolism and to start making some of those little changes that can speed up your metabolism, start feeding it more frequently, because your metabolism will always chase your intake. So if you're not eating frequently and you're not eating enough, your metabolism slows down. If you're feeding your body very frequently and you're eating enough or even more than enough, your metabolism will start to catch on to that as well.
I think
For
this is so excellent. Yeah, because there's like the intermittent fasting thing, which I feel like is really damaging, especially for women and especially women athletes. And, like this badge of honor to not eat until later in the morning. And you've already had, several hours of your day, you've worked out, and then, they're just subsisting on coffee. And I
yeah,
feel like maybe in the short term, you get, some results, what seems like results, but in the long term, it kind of tanks your metabolism.
absolutely. And this is kind of a tangent with the running on coffee in the morning, but that is super detrimental for women, especially, and our hormones, because our stress hormone cortisol is elevated first thing in the morning. If you don't eat anything, that cortisol just continues elevating. And if you work out, it elevates even further. Having coffee or any caffeinated beverage first thing in the morning, that cortisol goes through the roof. And when it stays elevated, that prevents fat burning. And instead, your body goes into a fat sparing mode. And it makes it really hard for you to be able to metabolize food that you need and break it down into energy, because instead your body wants to store it in case it needs it later, because it's
Mm.
basically in a state of stress at that point.
So you're saying don't drink coffee or drink coffee and eat some food before you go out.
I will never tell anyone to take out their coffee because I would never do that, but you definitely need to drink your coffee and eat, or have your coffee after you eat. And your
Okay.
food needs to have carbs and protein for it to really regulate that cortisol response.
Yeah. I think people just like to get going in the morning without eating because it's so hard to, run after you have to digest your food.
I get it. So I would say if you're not really hungry, or you don't have enough time to eat something, even just doing a simple carb 5 to 10 minutes before you work out, just like a banana, a piece of toast, that can just really help with your blood sugar, and it already gets that cortisol response to start decreasing slightly. The run, of course, will elevate it a little bit, but at least you're getting that blood sugar in a better state than when you first woke up. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, and I think you can train your body to eat breakfast, eat before you run, because like several years ago, I used to just go run on an empty stomach, fasting, thought it was amazing. And then realized that it was really bad for my hormones and was experiencing difficulties with that. And so then I, had to like train myself to be able to eat something, and figure out what works on my, it's gonna be gentle to my stomach, and then run. And of course, then fuel after your run again. And it's made a huge difference. And I'm to the point now where my MetPro coach, if we're on a like a down adjust, I'm like, don't take any macros away from my morning. Like I would rather like front load my calories in the day and eat lighter later in the day rather than take anything away from, my breakfast. So, I went from being like someone who ran fasted to like really seeing the value of that breakfast and that morning fueling. So
Absolutely. And you're so right. You can definitely train your body to look forward to breakfast. If you start waking up hungry, that's a good sign for your metabolism.
Yes.
Hmm.
And you can train your body to be hungry in the morning. It may take some time, especially if you've gone years without eating breakfast. But the more you start implementing even the smallest little thing when you wake up, your metabolism will start to pick up pace and it will catch on. Just like anything else, our bodies are very adaptogenic with changes that we make. And so we can change our metabolism just like we train our body for exercise,
So why do you say it's a good thing if you wake up hungry?
because that means your metabolism is, or your body is looking for food. Your metabolism is ramping up. You've just gone all night fasting. If you wake up and you're not hungry, your metabolism is probably pretty slow and needs some work.
Hmm.
So by waking up hungry, that lets me know that your metabolism is in a pretty good position starting out with. Um, so yeah, that's always a good indication of metabolism.
Well, that's good to know.
Do you wake
Awesome.
up hungry, Trevor?
Yeah, I have been, and I just ignore it because I'd rather, read a book and sit outside.
Drink his coffee.
Yeah, and then go run and then eat when I get back. But yeah, this is helping me rethink my morning routine.
There
Of
you
course,
go. You could even get like a ready to drink protein shake and have that
Hmm.
while you read, and you will be in a much better position throughout the rest of the day.
Hmm.
yeah, I'll just have to have Angie make it for me. Then I'll just grab it
I am
and
not your mother.
Well, Angie, good thing they make the kind that already come in a little carton, and you can just have those in the fridge ready for him.
We have all the protein stuff that for my kids to grab in the morning. Like, so, good point.
So we do have a question about pre-run fueling. We've been talking about that a little bit. This comes from Andrew from Perth, Western Australia. He says, "Good day, Trevor and Angie." That's literally what he said. I'm not making that up. He says, "I have to run very early, and usually I'm up and out in 20 minutes for an hours long run. I used to never bother eating, but recently committed to fueling better. What do you recommend for quick, easy, stomach friendly food in such cases?" All right. So you just mentioned like a simple carb a moment ago, banana, toast. I guess that kind of answers his question, huh?
Yeah, and then a couple other items. So you could do a banana or toast. You can even add some peanut butter just to get a little bit of protein, some fats for sustainable energy, especially since he's not able to get in a full meal. You could even do pretzels, applesauce pouches, the little uncrustable sandwiches, Nutri-Grain bars. If you're familiar with the little fruit bars called That's It, those are a great little simple carb source that you could consume, and as long as you eat it 5 to 10 minutes before you start, you'll have some good energy. It's way better than running with no fuel in your tank.
That's right.
Or even a UCAN bar, right?
Exactly. I even added that in my answer, but I didn't say it. You can. Energy bars are great.
I love how he lives his life. He's like up and then bam, just goes out the door, 1 hour long run. This guy's high on life here, Andrew from Perth.
I'm jealous. It takes me a good hour to really get up and moving.
Me too. I'm get up. I'm like, oh, what day is it? Oh man.
Same. And it also depends on how I sleep. I have a toddler that likes to wake me
Mm.
up. So there's no way I'm in and out in 20 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Someday, maybe, right?
Yeah, one day, just not today.
So let's talk about fueling during a run. We got some great questions sent in. This first question is from Shirish. Hopefully, I pronounced your name right. I probably didn't. I'm sorry about that. The question is, how many calories should be consumed in the form of gels during a marathon, and at what intervals? And I know the answer. The answer is going to be it depends.
That is my most famous answer. It does depend because it depends on each person, how they metabolize carbs, how many carbs their body needs for the training. But I would focus more on the grams of carbs in the gels rather than the actual amount of calories when it comes to training. Um, I always have my athletes focus on 30 to 60 grams of carbs every 30 to 60 minutes after the first 60 minutes of running. So there's a lot of 30 to 60 in there. I always call that the 30-60 rule, but it really depends. So 30 to 60, that's a big gap of contrast between, like, do you need 30? Do you need 60? So that's where like I work with my clients on determining how their energy was at 30 grams. If they're still lacking, we start increasing. And sometimes we'll play around with the timing as well. So I often have my clients start at 30 to 45 minutes instead of 45 to 60 minutes, just because it takes those gels time to actually work. It's not going to be an instant source of energy as soon as you consume the gel. So I try to get a kickstart on that energy before it starts tanking. Because
Yeah.
once it tanks, then it's hard to get it back up. But if you can fuel appropriately, you won't lose that gas and you'll just be able to keep going.
Yeah, I was thinking while you were talking that you don't want to get behind during a marathon because it is a long distance. It's not like you're running a 10K and, food is going to be waiting hopefully after you're done. You can play catch up kind of thing, but during a marathon that can really make or break your experience, and fueling at regular intervals for sure is helpful. And that's what the training process is like. Your long run should be about experimenting, like you said, with how many grams of carbs you need per hour and like what intervals your stomach digest them well. Because some people, they eat a whole gel at once and it's going to like make their stomach just hate them. And so they have to experiment with different forms of fueling sources sometimes instead of simple sugars. So yeah, there is a lot that goes into it.
Absolutely. You are definitely right about that. So I always recommend that you trial these several weeks, even months out from race day, because you don't want to go into a race trying something new because you don't know how it will affect your stomach. You don't know how your energy will respond. So there's a lot that goes into it. So you kind of have to train with your fueling just like you train for the actual running portion.
We've been using UCAN for years and it works great for us. And I know, and I've used the other stuff too in the past. And I think most of the time on the back of the gel package, it'll say what it recommends, like, take one per hour or every 30 minutes. But yeah, like you guys are saying, there's still a range. Depends on how much you weigh, how fast you're running, how long you're going to be out there, how hot it is. So all of these can play a factor, but there are general guidelines on the back of those gels, at least from what I remember.
Yes, there is.
Or available on websites, whatever, whoever manufactures your fueling products are often, or, there's probably the FAQ section of like what they recommend, what the ranges are.
Just take one gel every mile. carry 26 in your pockets.
Well, I sure hope you're using the UCAN at that point because they don't have the stimulants, so your digestive system might be able to handle that every mile. But certain gels out there, you'd be in trouble.
If you want to stop at every porta pot along the way, do Trevor's
Yeah.
fueling
You might even
strategy.
You gotta carry.
have to go off in the woods at certain times because not enough potties.
Wear a diaper.
See someone's out there running with a Walmart bag full of gels that they're just carrying with them because they have so many. All right, this one is from Chris.
Okay, Chris says, I'm a 40-something runner from Texas. I'm training for my first ever marathon, the Dallas Marathon. What kind of liquids and food guidelines do you have for longer runs and race day so I don't bonk halfway through?
First of all, congrats on training for your first marathon. That's super exciting. I would go ahead and start testing out some intra-run fueling. So try out some gels, try goos, chews, hydration, powders that you can put in your water. Try what works for you because it's really going to be individualized and dependent on what your stomach can handle and the amount of energy that you need. You'll also want to make sure that you get plenty of carbs in 1 to 3 days prior to your race day. Um, so you can have a carb heavy breakfast 3 to 4 hours before the race, but only do what you can handle. So again, this is something that you should test out well before your race day. Test out how much you can handle the morning of a long run. That way you know what to eat before a race. And then you want to consume some quick, simple carbs like a banana or toast 10 to 15 minutes before you start the race. And then during the race, your goal again is to get 30 to 60 grams every 45 to 60 minutes after the first 45 to 60 minutes. And then sometimes I'll have my clients take 1 to 2 gels every 30 to 45 minutes just because it's not instant energy. So we move that time up a little bit. And if they're not getting enough energy from one gel, because most gels will only give you about 20 to 25 grams per gel. So you often need that second gel to even hit that 30 grams.
We should explain what it is to bonk. Angie, have you ever experienced a bonk in a race?
Yeah, it's been a while, pre-UCAN days, but yes, it basically feels like you suddenly lose all will to live. You may be 10 miles from the finish line, you may be 1 mile from the finish line, and suddenly you just feel like, "I will never make it." It's like there's a psychological element to it, I think not getting enough carbohydrate to your brain, but also, it feels like your legs probably weigh about 30 pounds each, more than they normally do. Like you're wearing lead boots. So yeah, it's very unpleasant. And, I think everyone does it at least once in their running career. And then they realize like, oh, it's really important to prevent this because it's hard to
Yeah.
come back from a bonk. Like you can do it, but it's going
Mhm.
to slow you down and you're going to feel pretty miserable.
So
Absolutely.
I don't know if I've actually ever bonked in a race, but we all know the feeling of having low blood sugar, right? Sort of that jitteriness and panic. Is that is that what it kind of feels like to bonk? Sort of like this nausea or jitteriness
I
sometimes.
think it depends, it's one of those things
Okay.
people experience it differently, but yeah, it's like your body has suddenly stomped on the brake pedal and like, nope, I'm pulling the plug for today,
Yep.
unless you
And
give
you're
me some fuel.
Yep, and you're right with the mental part of it too, because carbs are our brain's primary source of fuel. So
Mhm.
if when you have that mental, when you've hit that mental capacity in the race, part of the bonking comes from that because your brain's not getting that energy that it needs, so it can't function. So your body definitely can't function after that.
Yes, and it's like the body, it can break down fat and protein to make that glycogen, but it takes a long time, and so it's not something you wanna just be sitting around on the side of the course, like, waiting for your body to make some more glycogen. It's like
Yes, please don't rely on that or you'll be sitting there all day to finish that race.
Ah,
I remember I have I don't think I've bonked, but I do remember one time getting really low on electrolytes and just feeling I was sweating a lot and it was hot and I forgot to bring my little you can hydrate or my hammer and Duralights and I just felt like something was off. Like I just did not feel myself. Kind of started getting a little jittery, and then it was a race in Switzerland, and they were giving out bouillon. Basically, they taken bouillon cubes. They taken bouillon cubes and melted them down or something and made it into a soup. So they were just giving out bouillon soup, and it worked. Like it restored me.
yeah,
My
body needs salt
I
too.
came back from the
Yep,
brink after
exactly.
that.
That's pretty funny. Now, the salt definitely works, but I haven't heard of anyone giving bouillon cubes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just kinda back to
That's a good
basics.
one. Yeah, that's a very good one. Hey, you got to do what you got to do in a time of need. Electrolytes are super important, though. I encourage all runners to use some form of electrolytes. And one way to really stay on top of your hydration, especially leading up to a race, of course, you want to aim to drink half your body weight in ounces several days prior. But then on race day, I want you to weigh yourself before you race and then weigh yourself afterwards. One big thing is replenishing what you lost after that race. So if you can drink an extra 16 to 24 ounces for every pound of body weight that you lose, that'll really just help replenish your hydration and your overall electrolyte balance. So that way you can recover and repair from that race.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, this one is from Lou. He says, "Hello, my question regards fueling for performance. I have my fueling regimen dialed in during long runs. I'm looking for foods and or drinks that can provide me with a good amount of energy that I can include in my daily meals for a week or two prior to a long run or to an ultra." So Lou's out there running ultras, wants to sort of beef up his fueling protocol before a race. So what would you recommend?
Yeah. So you're going to get energy from all of your macros. So all the carbs, protein, and fat that you eat. But I would really focus on getting carbs from sources like fruit and the starchy carbs like potatoes, rice, pasta, and oats. And food over supplements is always recommended. But then, of course, to add some extra in there, I would do something like the UCAN energy powder that you can mix up. You can drink that throughout the day, kind of fill in the gaps with your meals. That's always a great way. You could even do other types of energy shakes. You can make your own smoothies. Um, that's always an easy way to get some extra nutrients in and fill your body with good fuel sources. So yeah.
I like it.
This question comes from Saskia in the Netherlands, and she says, in the days leading up to a marathon or longer race, I always eat well. The goal is, of course, to optimize the storage of carbohydrates in the muscles and liver. I notice many runners eat a fairly large breakfast the morning of the race and wonder if that is beneficial. Is it really necessary to eat pancakes or a big bowl of porridge if you've eaten enough the days before, and especially the night before the race? How many carbohydrates does your body burn while you sleep that you still have to top up in the morning?
Eat at least 4 eggs right before marathon.
She's saying carbohydrates.
This is a good question, but back to my favorite answer, it really depends, because it all depends on how well you've trained your body to eat, and if you're used to eating a big meal before you run, or if you have enough time to eat a big meal, then you can absolutely go for it. But if it's something new for you and it's something that you have not tried before, I highly do not recommend eating a large breakfast before you go run. Um, like you said, as long as you're getting in enough carbs the days prior, then you can stick with your normal sized breakfast the morning of. You could even consume a couple simple carbs before you start the race, and then make sure you have a good plan for that intra-run fueling.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like practice with what your race morning breakfast will be. Like I often eat oatmeal most mornings of the week, and change it up a little bit with my add-ins and toppings. So often to a race, I travel with the instant oatmeal packs. Like I usually use the whole oats at home, but it's easier and more easy to digest. The packets of oatmeal. I usually do the ones that don't have any sugar or sweetener added to them. But, so I know like when I get that to race morning, I'm going to have something that my body is used to. I'm not relying on some breakfast at the hotel or trying to find food when, I'm in a strange location. And it's usually really simple to use the microwave in the room and like heat up some hot water and stir in your oatmeal, so, and I've heard like stories of people who are used to having like their banana and bagel for their race morning breakfast, and then they get to the hotel and like they're out of bagels or they can't find their source. And so I know as runners we tend to try to control all of the all of the elements we can for races, especially if we're concerned about a good performance. So that's something to think about too. Like not only get your body used to what you're going to eat, but also have that on hand and make sure it's something that's not super niche that you have to like search the whole city for.
Yes, I love that you brought that up, because I can't even count on two hands how many clients or athletes that I've worked with in the past. They have a great plan going into their race. They didn't plan well enough for their travel. They get
Mm.
there, they relied on what was available at the hotel. Instead, there was no oatmeal, there was no bagels. They had egg omelets that was loaded with avocado. The extra fat actually upset their stomach, and it just ends up being a disaster. So, exactly what you said, control the controllables and plan ahead, know what your body's used to, and take that.
Mm-hmm.
Take it with you. I can't stress that enough.
Yes.
Travel with what you're used to.
Exactly. I've been at races before and like gonna have, meet up with some people who listen to the podcast. And I've had people before like, do you have an extra UCAN bar? Because like for some reason, like one of their family members ate theirs that they were relying on, or they forgot it, and it's like that stuff
Oh, that's the
happens. So
worst. It does happen. And hopefully you have a backup plan for that. But sometimes you just got to roll with the flow and make do with what you have.
exactly.
Well, if I was in the Netherlands, like Saskia, and I was in the Netherlands earlier this year, I would start my morning with a savory raclette, croquette, like a savory little dish, and then I would have a couple stroop waffles, some black coffee.
This is before a race.
Yeah, stroop waffles. That's the ticket. Have you ever seen those honey stinger waffles?
I love those.
That's a stroop waffle.
Hmm.
Like some genius went over there and saw it in the Netherlands and came back and marketed it to Americans.
Yeah, and we love it. It's really
Exactly.
good.
Yep.
Oh, and then I did want to touch on, I know she had a second part to her question about how many
Mm-hmm.
carbs you burn while you sleep.
Yes.
Again, It depends. So
Mhm.
if you have a really good metabolism, you're going to continue burning calories throughout the night regardless. But you're not using as much energy. So it really just depends on your body state, your muscle mass, your recovery, and how well you're resting. So I would really say it's important just to make sure that you're consuming enough carbs, protein, and fat each day, not just on your race days, and not that way you don't have to worry about, oh, am I getting enough on race day? If you're replenishing well the week prior, you should be fine.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Man, I'm interested in that. I want to burn more carbs while I sleep. There's got to be some future technology that allow us to, burn all kinds
Burn
of.
fat while we sleep.
Well,
Yeah.
there's two methods that could potentially help, and one of those is having more muscle mass, and then two, just training your
Strength training.
metabolism.
What was it? What was the second thing?
Training.
Training your
Oh, okay.
metabolism. Yeah,
So
those could help.
don't go long periods between meals
Yeah.
and strength train, like you mentioned
Absolutely.
earlier, that's like a key for pretty much anyone who wants to
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
healthy
Muscle
metabolism.
mass is more metabolically active than body fat. So the more
Mhm.
you have, the quicker that rate of burn will be, even throughout the night. It does slow down because we're not burning as much energy, but it's still moving.
Okay, let's talk about post run. Here's a question from Bridget. Hey guys, I so appreciate you. Well, thank you, Bridget. We appreciate you too. I'm kind of desperate to figure this out. I have been having trouble with nausea and vomiting after races in 5 of my last 6 half marathons. This happened. I feel fine during the race. Haven't really changed my fueling. Don't really eat much during races, but always take at least a sip at water stops. I alternate electrolytes and water at the stops. On training runs for a half marathon or less, I typically don't take anything. And then she says, which I do realize is less than ideal. But I don't have nausea or vomiting on my training runs. It usually hits me hard and fast within 30 minutes after the race and lasts up to 4 hours. Man. She says, really weird, and advice would be really awesome. Her next race is Wine Glass in New York, upstate New York, the Wine Glass Half Marathon in October. And thanks for all you do. And that comes from Bridget. Yeah, so this kind of touches on what we've talked about so far, about being able to fuel when you run. And maybe that's where we should start with her. I don't know. What do you think, Amber?
Yeah, I would say one thing I would touch on is instead of alternating your water and electrolytes, just stick with electrolytes throughout the race. And then I'd really dive into what you're consuming before and during the race because it may not be enough to keep your blood sugar regulated. And a lot of times that can cause symptoms of nausea and vomiting if you're having low blood sugar. And then back to the electrolytes, if you're not getting enough sodium in, that can lead to hypernatremia, and that or nausea and vomiting is often a sign of that as well. So I would really focus on making sure that you're getting enough electrolytes in and making sure that you are having enough carbs throughout because one of the most important things you can do for your body, and this goes for overall health and performance, is making sure that your blood sugar is regulated because if that tanks, everything else kind of suffers. You start feeling bad, you don't have the energy, your performance tanks. So that's one of the best things you can do is just make sure you're getting enough carbs before, during, and even after the race. So try and find a good refuel meal as soon as you're finished and see if that helps with the symptoms as well.
Yeah, like even if you feel nauseated after the race, like try to drink like 7 Up or something that has some form of carbohydrate. Even if that's I'm not recommending soda for daily consumption, but get something in there to like help your blood sugar. This has kind of made me think because there's a lot of people that I know after a race, they feel they're not hungry and they just feel kind of super like off. Their stomachs are off. Trevor often struggles with this. My sister, they
Yep.
just are not hungry after a race. And I finish a race and I am like ravenous. Like I will
Mm-hmm.
eat everything in sight. And I'm like, what is the difference? It's like, I don't know if you've run into that, but
All the time. I would say one of the biggest differences is Angie, you've been working with MetPro, so you've trained your metabolism in a way.
I
And
expect
then
food and I expect it now.
exactly, and your body expects that from you. It's used to getting fuel, it needs that fuel, and it's going to let you know. For someone who's not used to that or hasn't trained their body to do that, they may not even be picking up on those cues. And anytime I have someone that says that they're not hungry after a race or they don't eat, I'm like, I give them a specific snack and I'm like, this is what you're going to eat as soon as you finish, whether you're hungry or not. I don't
Choke
care if
that
you're
baby down.
bagging it down, you're going to eat it. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, man, that actually made me feel so much better. And part
Hmm.
of it is because you just ran a marathon. Your blood sugar's low. You've used up all of your glycogen stores. Your energy tanks are empty. You got to replenish. And if you don't replenish, that's when you start feeling really bad. You're dehydrated. You might even be heat exhausted, depending on the temperature and the humidity. So it's really important to replenish with some carbs, protein, and fats afterwards, and then also get your electrolytes in.
And you also mentioned fueling during a run when you answered Bridget's question. And even though, Bridget, you're only doing a half marathon, it is still important to fuel. And you, it sounds like you realize, that your fueling and intake has been less than ideal. So I hope you can find some fuel that you can start to introduce during your long runs. Like even if you're just let's say you're doing an 8 miler or a 10 miler, definitely go out there and take some fuel. You can get through a half marathon with nothing. I've done it before, but it is definitely better to try to take something like take a UCAN bar or 2 gels, and maybe that will help with the nausea. What do you guys think?
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I do not encourage anyone to run with no fuel.
That's right.
I always say, think of your body like a car. If you're going to go across the country, you have to constantly put fuel in it to make it there. If you stop fueling up, your tank's going to run out, and eventually you're just going to be putting along until you stop. That's pretty
Hmm.
much how our body works.
Yeah.
All right, moving on here, we're going to switch to the topic of vegetarianism and veganism. We had questions sent in about fueling and eating so forth as a vegan runner. So here's one: what foods are recommended for vegan runners interested in weight loss, especially for older women runners?
Yeah, and this is a good question. I work with a lot of vegans all the time, and sometimes fueling, especially for weight loss, is one of the hardest things. So I wouldn't say there are really any specific foods that vegan runners should consume, but I would focus more on nutrient dense foods and making sure that you're getting enough quality protein. So, as we know, protein is so much harder for vegans to get in. So, you'll want to focus on those quality sources like beans, nuts, nut butters, seeds, even tofu, tempeh. You can even get fortified pastas or anything like that that has a good quality protein. Um, I often recommend a good quality protein powder as well because that can help fill in the gaps when if you go out to eat, most restaurants don't have vegan protein options. They offer a salad and that's really it. So having that protein powder can help in times of need. And then you'll already get some good quality carbs from the protein sources because most of the vegan proteins are compound and they have carbs or even fats in them as well. So just make sure you're getting plenty of fruits and vegetables. And then for the fat loss side of things and really working on that weight loss, I would suggest aiming for 20 to 30 grams of protein every 2 to 3 hours and then filling half your plate with veggies. If you can do that, those veggies will help keep you full along with the protein. It will limit the amount of carbs that you're having, even though carbs are super beneficial, but reducing for short periods has been shown to have positive effects with body composition and losing fat. So that's a good tip that I always recommend for people looking to lose weight and not wanting to track. That's one way to do it is by the plate method.
Yeah, I think that is great advice. And, for the vegan runners that I know of, they really have to be intentional about that protein, especially as an older woman, because you're kind of fighting the battle against muscle loss. And, you want to be building muscle or at least preventing muscle loss. And sometimes I've even seen research that I think it's like perimenopausal, menopausal women have more trouble absorbing protein. So you
Mhm.
cannot skimp on that protein piece. I feel like for just overall strength and muscle health, and of course that ties into weight loss as well because, like you said, the more muscle you have, the more your metabolism is going to be healthier.
Exactly. And a lot of times for my vegan clients, I basically force them without forcing them to carry packets of beans with them, protein powder, the beans is the biggest one because kind of like the little tuna packets that you can buy, the individual packs, you can get beans in packs like that too.
Oh,
So I always
nice.
encourage my clients to pick up some of those, keep them in their car, keep them in their bag, just have them available because I can't even keep up with how many times my vegan clients are like, yeah, I went out to eat, but all they had was a salad. I didn't have any protein, so I didn't get that in. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, so you had no protein at this meal. When was your next dose of protein? And they're like, well, then I was out and I skipped a snack. Okay, well, there we're going a long time without protein. So those beans
Mm-hmm.
can come in handy. So can protein powder. All you need is some water.
Yep.
So those are a couple things that I have my clients do just to hit their protein goals and make sure that they're getting it every 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah, or even like I know it's not ideal to rely on bars, but even like a vegan protein bar, keep that in your backpack, purse, like, your desk at work, because there are those times when you just cannot get in the protein that you need, and you need something like that to just keep your blood sugar nice and stable.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Even carry some nuts. Nuts are
Right.
super easy to carry around with you.
Yes.
It's true. So here's a question from someone who follows a paleo diet.
Dina asks, as a long distance runner who follows the paleo diet, she says, I have stomach issues with gluten, sugar, rice, and gluten free breads. I'm struggling with what to eat before a long run and during the run to fuel my exercise. Any advice would be incredibly appreciated.
Yeah, so the first thing that stood out to me was the stomach issues with those types of foods. So if you haven't already, I would work with a professional to get to the root cause of why you can't tolerate those foods. For instance, it could be due to an allergy or an inflammatory response, or is there an underlying gut issue that hasn't been addressed? So that would be the first thing that I would tackle because you might actually be able to tolerate these foods, but there might be something going on that's making your body have symptoms to that. So I would dig into your gut health, and then before a long run, I would mainly focus on those fast digesting simple carbs such as a banana, potatoes. You could do gluten-free pastas, mango, or anything like that. And then just throw in a moderate amount of protein, and this will help stabilize your blood sugar. And then if you're running 60 minutes or less, no intra-run fueling is usually needed, but that's also very independent on each individual. And if you're going more than 60 to 90 minutes, I would focus on the 30 to 60 grams of carbs every 45 to 60 minutes. You could use things like gels, goos, gummies, or even energy bars. You just want something that's easy to carry with you, something that's quick digesting to get that quick energy. One of my favorites is the UCAN energy gels or the bars because they're easy to carry with you. They're easy on digestion. They don't use regular sugar or stimulants, which makes it easy on your stomach, but you can still get those carbs in using that. Um, and then since they don't use caffeine or stimulants, you won't have that energy crash later on either. So that's something you have to be cautious of. Some of those gels, they have a lot of caffeine, so you might feel great for an hour, and then halfway through the run, you start to tank.
Right.
So yeah, and I would say if you don't like using gels, find something like applesauce pouches or fruit snacks like the little gummies or the That's It bar. You could even take a pack of honey or some dates with you and make your own energy bites along the way. So those are a couple things that you could do to fuel your runs.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know some people who like take mashed sweet potato with like a little bit of maple syrup mixed in, and like it's, kind of like a goo or a consistency like in a little baggie, and you have can get incredibly creative to figure out what works, but
Yes,
the key
and
is to be doing
I
something.
yeah, it's important to do something, and you do have to get creative at times. I have a client right now that I'm working with that he couldn't tolerate anything with artificial, the gels, the goos, none of that. So I had him mash up banana, stick it in a bag with some honey. He freezes that, and then when he thaws it out a little before he goes, he carries it in his bag. When he needs it, he just tears off a little corner of the Ziploc bag and squirts it in his mouth. So it kind of works like a gel, but it's a lot easier for him, and it suits his digestive system too, most
Sure.
importantly.
So can you give us like examples of the type of people that you're helping right now as a MetPro coach? Like what kind of goals are you helping people strive for?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question because I have so many different types of clients. So I have some clients that their only goal is fat loss. They're not into exercise, so it's solely focusing on their nutrition, getting their weight down. Um, but I like to focus on getting their fat loss down. So anytime I don't like to use the word weight necessarily because that can mean muscle loss, that can be water loss. So their goal is fat loss. I have a lot of marathon runners. Some are working on hitting PRs. Some are just looking to finish a marathon. Maybe it's their first race. I have a couple ultra runners. I have a new client that is actually training for a 100-miler coming up in December.
Wow.
And he's actually going for time. So
Wow.
we're really hitting his nutrition hard right now, making sure that his intra-run fueling is on point. I have some clients that are big into strength training where they don't really do much endurance, but their goal is to change their body composition. So I really work with just a ton of different clients, and I try and approach each one with an individual mindset because everyone's so different. And I think that's one thing that I really love about nutrition is I can help as many people as I can, but their goals are different. How their body responds is different. Their metabolism is different. So it kind of lights a fire under me to kind of figure out that puzzle.
See, that would be the most frustrating thing for me, right? It's like,
You just want to give blanket advice and
Yeah,
it
it's
work
like-
for everyone.
everyone's so different. It's like a moving target. And
that would be so boring.
You're like a nutrition detective, really you have to be.
Yeah, exactly. I love to dig a little deeper to figure out what's causing this issue. Why is their energy not lasting? Like all of those things. Like nutrition is so complex, and I think a lot of people don't realize that until they start focusing on it. Some people just think I'm the food police and tell them what to eat and what not to eat. Well, that's not exactly true. I don't like to cut out any foods from anyone's diet. Everything can fit in moderation, and it's all about just finding what works for each person.
getting that metabolism revved up, right?
Exactly.
MetPro stands for metabolic profiling. So everyone's metabolism is unique. And we've had Angelo on the podcast. We usually have him on about once a year, and he's always fun to talk to. He's super high energy. And
Yep. I could listen to Angelo talk all day.
yeah,
He's
He
so knowledgeable.
Yep. And he's told us several times. The insidious thing about the metabolism is what works for you now might stop working, or what worked for you in the past may not work now because of how you're older or just different stage of life. So everyone's metabolism is just an enigma wrapped in a mystery.
It's a moving target, so you have to constantly chase that target.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad there are people like you that enjoy doing it and know how to do it, because it wouldn't be my gig, but man, I'm so excited for the results that you guys at MetPro have gotten for people in our listening audience, Angie included. She's in our listening audience as well, even though she doesn't listen to the podcast. Yeah. So super grateful for MetPro and for the experience that we've had with it. And Amber, thanks for joining us on the podcast. This is actually our first official interview that we've done with you. But man, you are very knowledgeable, and I can see why they recruited you to MetPro. So
Thank you. I try to do my best. I like to stay on top of my research, but it was a pleasure being here, and I enjoyed being here with both you and Angie.